Hey, everybody, it's Quinn Magnuson, host of the EOR podcast. Today, my guest is Daniela Wolfe, host of the podcast Best D Life and author of Balance Breakthrough. She has spent over 25 years as a licensed master social worker, helping professionals and families manage stress, avoid burnout, and build lives where self care is not optional, it's essential. Daniela's mission is simple but powerful, helping you find the bliss in your busy. Daniela, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, Quinn. I'm excited to be here today.
I want to go here first. I mean, obviously, you have a long background in social work. I want to know what drew you into social work originally and how it evolved into the work you do today. Because I know that social workers can themselves get burnt out. It's a compassionate, endeavor to be in that field, and it can really burn you out. The friends that I know that have been in social work, it happens to them. In my research with you, it's happened to you as well. So let's talk about your background in social work, the evolution to doing what you do today, and really what inspired you to start Best D Life and to help people who have gone through burnout regardless of age.
Yeah. No, thank you. I've been in social work for actually about 27 years, 26, 7, no, oh my gosh, 29 years. Um, flies by. And definitely, I've always wanted to help teens specifically. So I've been fortunate and blessed enough to have had the opportunity to do that for my career. I've worked with court order kids, I work with teens in a high school setting. Definitely a lot of mental health is what I work with because it's definitely something that affects teens. And I don't think we always recognize that. But like you said, as social workers, especially, and I think any helping profession, nurses, doctors, EMTs, we are sometimes more prone for burnout because there's that compassion fatigue, as well as there's the secondary trauma of going through hard events with other people, even though it's not our life events. It's almost like the bystander effect with bullying. Like when you see something bad happen to somebody else, we're empathetic. So we feel that pain. We still kind of emotionally go through that. And so that can set us up for burnout, as well as when we love what we do and we're passionate about it, we can toss our boundaries out the window, which is one of a primary causes of burnout that people don't even realize. And so a lot of those factors in general can set people up. And like you said, yes, I've unfortunately been through my own burnout. My situation came up about probably 20 years ago. I was going through a divorce. My kids were really young. They were 4 and 6 months old. And definitely, I was all in on my kids, wanted to do it all, be it all, prove that I was capable of handling, all these different life circumstances and not have it affect anybody. And so I wasn't great at asking for help. I was burning the candles at both ends, and I found myself showing up irritable, snapping at my kids, and drove myself straight into my own burnout. And so during my little meltdown moment, so to speak, I realized I needed to start practicing what I preach and what I help everybody else with. And so I started super small. I started with a daily gratitude practice, 3 to 5 things every day that I was grateful for. And they were small things, like I said, what before I live in the Northeast. So maybe the sun was out that day if it was winter time. Maybe someone held the door for me, or I got my favorite banana smoothie, as well as my grocery store had free childcare. And so I started to use that. But also, I ran into some mindset obstacles, some limiting beliefs of this guilt when I would run into people and they'd be like, "Oh, where are the kids? Why don't you have them?" And feeling like I needed to over explain and justify why they were in the childcare room, why I wasn't with them. And then I also joined a gym that had childcare to bring some movement back into my life. And just even these small, simple shifts, not only did I start to show up better, I was better at work. We were having fun at home, but my kids were really excited to come and share with me who they met, what they did, and to start to see the benefits where self-care really isn't just about me, it's about the energy that I bring, and that affects everybody else around me. So not only was I doing better, my friends were noticing, people were asking, what was I doing? How was I fitting these things in? As well as sharing with me moments that they took some time for themselves because of something I said or did. And I realized I think we're all looking for that validation and permission that it's okay to take time for ourselves, that it doesn't mean, me first, it means me too. And by practicing this, it kind of grew. And like you said, I now have a podcast. I love to talk about this. I love to coach others and do corporate trainings where I can help bring this message of how to not only prevent burnout, but start living a life that you love every single day, that you don't have to wait for when the kids grow up or for all these other what ifs or milestones, but to really start living that lifestyle every single day.
Yeah, I've interviewed a lot of people and I read a lot of profiles for guests that want to be on the show, and a lot of them are quote unquote burnout specialists. And I'm not going to say they aren't or they are. Like everybody has their definition. The one common thread that I feel goes through where the term burnout is spoken is this, and I believe this is that burnout happens whether it be in the workplace, in your own personal life, regardless of the arena. Burnout happens when you are constantly trying to fulfill the expectations of others.
Hmm.
When you start fulfilling your own expectations of yourself for yourself is where burnout changes to growth, changes to passion, changes to enjoyment, changes to just a better life.
Hmm.
And I'm not saying you disregard others, but I think, man, managed expectations is literally kind of the backbone of all relationships. So whether it be a relationship with your employers, a relationship with your teachers, if you're a student, with your friends, with your spouse, it is sort of what causes people to burn out in whichever way and form they burn out. But it's managing the expectations of others that they have of you. Does that make sense? And do you feel like that can be somewhat a widespread definition of what burnout can be?
Yeah, I mean, that's absolutely a piece of it. That's
Yeah.
why, I know we'll talk about boundaries because that's one of my favorite B words. And that's definitely a huge piece of preventing that burnout is putting boundaries in place. And like you said, that helps to manage other people's expectations when not only you have good boundaries, and boundaries aren't always a no, sometimes they're a yes, but when you communicate them as well. But another way I love to look at burnout as well, there's an analogy that I love. It's where imagine you're sitting in front of a bonfire, and so you keep putting logs on the fire and creating this big red burning blaze. And that's where like what stress can look like. And stress is a normal part of life. Preventing burnout isn't about eliminating all stress because a lot of very positive things in our life can be super stressful as well. Think of getting married, starting a new job, graduating college, like positive things can create stress. So you're putting these logs on the fire, you're putting more on, and that creates this big burning blaze. But now you keep stacking them maybe in a way where they're all on top of each other. And now you've burnt the fire out. And that's where what burnout is. It's kind of like that gray, ashy part where maybe you can fan the flames and get a little bit of red embers, but there's no energy left. You've created this system where you burnt out all the logs all at once because you just kept piling them on, as opposed to you think if you're creating, I don't know if you're a camper at all, if you're creating a good fire, you want to set up that little teepee when you're first setting up the logs because you need air, you need space between the logs, between the things on your to-do list in order to create a fire, energy, momentum, and motivation and productivity. They all need space and air. And so, part of that then looks at when we're planning our time, when we're creating our lives, when we're taking on all these extra logs that create that stress, are we giving them space? Are we giving them room? Or are we just throwing them in one big pile? Because that's, like I said, where that burnout comes from. But you can handle all the stress. You can manage and do a lot of different things if you are intentional in how you're setting them up with some room and space in order to have that breathing room. And so I love that analogy because whenever I've told it, people are like, oh my gosh, I can see the difference between, that stress pile and the intentional space that to prevent that burnout.
Yeah, the visuals,
Hmm.
just going wild right now. I imagined it this way. It's like you've got this great little fire going. It's the energy you have. It's like I got some energy. I'm ready to go. I'm motivated, and the fire's going. You've built your little teepee or the cabin, right? With the air, you got space for yourself. You got some air to breathe. And when others are coming and throwing logs on the fire, right? But they're not handing them to you saying, "Hey, do you have time for this?" And then you place it where you feel like you've got space and time and air. They're
Mhm.
just keep throwing the wood on. And now you've got 37 pieces of wood on top of this small, nice fire you used to have, and it just burns out.
Yeah.
That wonderful analogy.
That's where those boundaries come in, and those
Yeah,
boundaries are gonna
hand
protect
me the
your
wood so I
energy.
can place it. Yeah.
Yeah, they protect your fire. They protect your productivity, your creativity, your motivation, all those things that we burn out when we put too much, and that's why, like, when I talk about work-life balance, it's not about everything being equal. People don't always love the word balance because they're like, "Oh, you can't have everything equal." And that's true. But I believe balance comes from your ability to adapt, pivot, have resilience, and boundaries. And when you have those four components in place, you can find that work life balance and flow between what's happening outside of work, what's happening in work, those unexpected moments that come up that can really derail you. When you're able to adapt and pivot, you can still flow through your day and not unpack and stay in that moment and let it upset the whole kind of life that you have going on, as well as it doesn't have to occur within 24 hours. Some days might be super work heavy, some days might be super fun and family heavy and that type of thing. And that's where, again, you find that flow and harmony between all of these different parts of your life because you are your work and you are your life, and they need to be able to balance together.
Yeah, I wanna talk about the term work-life balance just for a second because
Yeah.
it's something I don't know when it was coined. I'm probably guessing sometime in the 21st century here, but, it's something that kinda gets tossed around a little too easily right now,
Hmm.
and I think that work-life balance, literally, it's so situational and unique to everybody individually. Um,
Absolutely.
if you love what you do, then it really doesn't even enter the conversation because like I'll work 16 hours at editing podcasts and doing coaching and whatever because I'm passionate about it. I love it. The time flies by. And
Hmm.
people are like, well, you don't go out. You don't have time to, do other things. I'm like, no, because I want to do this. And so Alex Ramosi even said it. He goes, I'm doing what I love to do. I don't need work-life balance. He goes, this just is life.
Hmm.
And it's interesting because people use that term a lot. How is that affecting the workplace today though? Because every employer now seems to claim almost in job postings, it's like good work-life balance.
Yeah.
But what does that mean? If we can paint a big brush for it in the employment sector, what is it that employers need to provide for their people to truly give them work-life balance?
Yeah. I believe those, like I said, those 4 components that I said, adapt, pivot, resilience, and boundaries. Like, just think about it, like for me, when I was a single working mom, the ability to adapt, like, oh my God, my kid is sick. I need to be able to leave and go and take care of them. That's how I can adapt. I can pivot and maybe then do my work online. That's going to help create that balance for me so that I don't feel that constant guilt and torn between I need to do this and I need to do that, and to be able to have some autonomy in making that decision of what that looks like for me on a day-to-day basis. Like, as an entrepreneur, you have a lot of that autonomy to say that. So in a work setting where you're working and answering to somebody else, being able to have that same flexibility to be able to respond to your life in a way that you need to on, like you said, an individual situational basis, I think is really helpful, as well as that resilience of realizing, rest isn't lazy. Rest is very powerful. You look at, like, professional athletes, they work out for 6 days and they take that seventh day off, not because they're too tired or too lazy, but they realize that's a power move when it comes to really being strong and successful and building more strength and resilience. I talk a lot about mental fitness and I parallel it to physical fitness. We know the steps it takes to get physically fit. We have a routine, we have consistency, we do certain things in order to build strength so that maybe you can not totally break your hip if you stumble a little bit, or be able to go up the stairs and keep your breath, or keep up with your kids. It's the same way with your mental fitness. You build these strategies, you build these habits to build your mental and emotional strength so that as life happens, you're able to kind of roll with it, bounce back, and keep going. And then those boundaries are really important too, like a corporate setting, to allow you to shut your computer off when you leave and not be expected to respond to emails 24/7 or get text messages, you know, first thing in the morning and things like that. To have those boundaries and allow your employees employees to feel comfortable within those boundaries, like they don't have to hustle 24/7, is I think where a lot of companies are trying to then, like you said, use that term work-life balance to show, okay, we hear you, we see you, and we want to work with you.
How much did the pandemic affect work-life balance and the definition of that? Because,
Mhm.
for example, I know, for the company that I worked for during that entire time, we were able to be as productive, working from home in front
Mhm.
of computer screens because everybody accepted the fact that we understood that that had to happen. One, not just our company, but also the clients we worked for, and it just became the norm. So how did and but now it's affecting people going back to work. It's affecting people quitting, the great what is it, the great resignation, things like that. So how much did the pandemic affect burnout slash work life balance slash, how people view how important their work and career truly is?
Yeah, it blurred the boundaries is what it did. It took an eraser and it kind of like smudged out that line between this is who I am here, this is who I am here. And we lost that transition, especially when we found, oh, I can set up a Zoom for late at night. I can, check my emails now from home. I can do all these other things and feel like we're multitasking throughout our day when we're actually we're losing some of our effectiveness and some of our productivity when we're trying to do that in both areas. We're losing our effectiveness in our relationships when we're, taking that quick call at our kids' soccer game and maybe they score and they look up and the image they have is you on your phone, not watching. And so I think those boundaries part is really where we started to lose some of that. Even people who still work from home, you know, being able to really shut down and walk away from their computers and devices and that type of thing. I think that's definitely an effect that the pandemic had, as well as it highlighted, I think, some of the roles that we're taking on. And women really saw like, holy cow, and no offense to men, but we're still expected to take care of the household, the kids, and our jobs in addition, as opposed to just one thing.
Yeah. No, it definitely did that. Um, one of the quotes that obviously, you've come up with is finding the bliss in your busy.
Mhm.
What does that mean in real life for someone listening right now?
Yeah, because like I said, it's individual to everybody what makes us happy, but that's the whole point of that third piece that I talk about, in my exhaustive to empowered formula. That's the way that I help people. That's the system that I use. It focuses on your mindset, your time planning, and your self-care. And that last piece, that self-care, I think it gets a bad rap. It can be trivialized as something nice to have, something fluffy. People automatically assume it's like getting your nails done, spa days, massages, but that's not practical or sustainable on a day-to-day basis. But the thing is, you wouldn't eat on Sunday and think you're not going to be starving by Tuesday. You can't practice self-care for like an hour on the weekend and think that you're going to be recharged and energized the entire week. We need to almost kind of recharge ourselves like we do our phones several times a day. We need to plug in to those things that light us up, that energize us, that make us feel confident, that make us feel good about ourselves. Like that's the whole point of self-care. It's not just feeling calm and zen, but it's about what you bring to any situation you're in. I heard an expression once like you're the weatherman and you're going to decide if it's going to be stormy or sunny the second you walk in. And so self-care is everything from how you eat, how you sleep, how you move, how you dress, how you decorate and organize your home, how you connect with others, how you think about money, as well as that traditional personal development like meditation, mindfulness, journaling, those types of practices. And so to see that there's a variety of different ways to tap into this and it can be done in micro moments throughout your day. 10 minutes here, 5 minutes there. I even teach a small 1-minute self-care practice. You can now start to see that the bliss in your busy isn't just, one set moment in time, but it's so many things that you're integrating throughout your entire day.
Yeah, it reminds me of there's a book, and I'm sure you're familiar with it. It's called Your Oxygen Mask First
Mhm.
by Kevin Lawrence. And it's specifically for leaders. It's people who own businesses, people who are in any leadership position, saying that for you to truly be the best for your people, you need to be your best.
Mhm.
and taking time for yourself. But there's so many, and this is where I want to kind of switch topics with you, Danielle, is leaders tend to have, especially ones who are business owners, maybe not just middle management, but business owners especially, they tend to have imposter syndrome. One, and what that does is it causes them to feel like they need to always be proving themselves to the people that they're leading, to their employees, so that, whoever that it is that's watching them, right? And that's where burnout happens for leaders, where leaders, especially business owners, and I'm staying there, is I had one business owner basically say, as long as I'm awake, I'm thinking or doing business.
Mhm.
And I felt the same way even when I owned my business. And I didn't mind that. That's fine. I was it's like taking care of your child. I mean, taking care of business is it's your own child. But it burned me out after 4 years. And I ended up selling the business because I wasn't taking time for myself because I felt that guilt.
Yeah.
That if I did take a day off, that if I did take a few hours to go and do something for me, my employees would go, "Oh, look at big boss man walking away and doing what he wants to do." And even for my children, I always want my children to see me being productive because I don't want them to think that not being productive is okay.
Mhm.
And it's that constantly proof of in that imposter syndrome. Sorry, I'm rambling a bit, but let's talk about leadership. I'm sure you've worked with leaders. I'm sure you've worked with business owners that do exactly what I'm saying that they're doing. But how do they break that cycle? Because it really kind of never ends as long as they still own that business or they're still in that leadership position.
Yeah. And like I said, it starts with that mindset piece for sure. I believe when you think differently, you feel differently. When you feel differently, you act differently. So it's not just about the things you do, but the way, like you said, you're thinking about it. And even just kind of rethinking resting isn't doing nothing, and to be able to see it as productive, to reframe. I think, like you said, that's where some of that imposter syndrome comes up because we make those expectations of what we assume other people are thinking about us versus recognizing, we would never speak to anybody else as harshly as we do to ourselves. And so to change the conversation in our own head is how we then start to change the narrative with those people around us. Maybe for the person who the leader who's taking a half day to go be at his kid's school or go golfing with his buddies or things like that. And people look at him and go, must be nice. Instead of having kind of that judgment to be like, yeah, it is. Why don't you come with me? Why don't you take your personal time, take some your vacation time, start using, almost model what we want them to do as well and see it from a different perspective. It's going to help them recharge and be more productive and creative for you as an employee if they feel that their time is just as valuable as yours, not I have to work 24/7, but you get to take time off. It creates the culture of how your employees are going to show up based on the things that you're modeling. But you can't just do it if you're, again, like you said, stuck in your own head. So to look at your mindset, what are you telling yourself when it comes to rest, when it comes to your work hours? Do you think it has to be 24/7 or do you believe in having set work hours and things like that?
Basically, my question on burnout is it can look different for men and women, even though there are a lot of similarities. But what are some differences between what burnout looks like for men and women?
Yeah, like you said, at one point, for men, it definitely can fall into the way they perceive other people are viewing them. Are they in charge? Are they being responsible? Are they being the leader that they need to be? And so it can come across sometimes, like you said, they overwork a lot of times. They can detach where they prioritize work over family, even if they say that's not one of their values that they still feel like they need to keep proving themselves. So there's a lot of kind of that type of behavior, over proving, over investing in the things that maybe aren't aligned with their true values and that type of thing. With women, I definitely see a lot of it, but I think we can fall more into we kind of turn in on ourselves a little bit. So, I call mine the mean girls in my head where it's like, I have less belief in myself the more burnt out I get. I can pile on more of those negative comments and it doesn't feel possible to prove even if I keep trying to do more. And there's a lot of guilt, especially where we feel like we're letting other people down. And so that people pleasing, we say yes to a lot more things. And it does there's no one way or stereotypical way for men or women to experience burnout. And sometimes we can be so far in it, we don't see it until maybe we do have something physical come up. We might have a heart attack, we might have high blood pressure, something physical to kind of put the brakes on the fact that we are overdoing it. I know Ariana Huffington's talked about the fact that, when she was first putting out the paper, she was, barely sleeping, running at all hours and that kind of a thing. And it took a physical event for her to be like, I need to start prioritizing my sleep. So many times we don't realize how these things can kind of pile on each other. If you don't sleep well, you might not eat well. I'm not in a great mood, so I don't connect well. I don't move as much. And so then it's like they affect all the other areas of your life. So just recognizing that being even hyper focused on one thing, I know you said, like following your passion, that is what you want to do, but to still make time for the other areas of your life.
So for someone, continuing on the concept of burnout, for someone who says, well, I have no time for this.
Hmm.
Um, I've always found that basically the answer to that is, well, okay, how much of a priority is it?
Yeah.
And I'll give you an example. I get business owners that say, like, I tell them, you need to take some time for yourself. Like, I don't know if it's going to the gym for a workout or if you want to grab a 9 holes of golf, whatever. That, but it's like, well, I don't have time for that. Or even people who are maybe on a weight loss journey or trying to get more fit, they're like, well, I know I need to go to the gym, but I don't have time for that.
Mhm.
It's prioritization.
Yeah.
So for someone who feels like they have zero time and needs to prioritize, what's a step they can take towards creating that time? Is it an assessment of what truly the priorities are?
Mhm.
Or what does it
Mhm.
look like for you when you were coaching somebody who says, I have no time?
Yep, and like I said, that's that second component. Once we've worked on your mindset, we really do break down your time. I use a tool called the Eisenhower matrix, and it's a very simple tool. It's 4 little
Hmm.
quadrants, and it looks at what's important and urgent. So what's has to happen now and has to happen with you. What's important but not urgent. So maybe it's getting together with friends or time for self-care, which is truly important, but you need to maybe plan ahead to make sure you're fitting that in.
Hmm.
What's urgent but not important. So what has to happen, but maybe not by you? You can do a meal service. You can use a carpool to drive your kids around. You can find a way to delegate some of the tasks because they'll still happen, but you don't necessarily need to be the person behind it all. And then what's completely unimportant and unurgent? A lot of times, social media, TV can fall into those areas, even though sometimes they're nice ways to de stress. If we're overusing them, if they're taking up too much of our time, that's where we can lose a lot. And so we start to break down what are your real priorities. Because if you just have one long to do list, and granted, I've done this myself too, I just have one long list. But if everything carries the same weight, all of a sudden now nothing's important, because you've leveled the playing field. And so, once you can then pinpoint your priorities and start to schedule maybe 2 to 3 total of your important urgent priorities on a day-to-day basis, and then start to sprinkle in some of the other stuff, as well as I use a time blocking system where you're intentionally putting breaks, what I call buffer zones in between your different tasks,
Right.
so that one, you allow life to happen. So you're walking out the door, you spill your coffee, you're not running late because you already had 15, 20 minutes in between your next two things. But also, if nothing happens, now you've got 15, 20 minutes to fit in that self care. Because, like I said, it can be done in micro moments. It can be as small as a 10-minute walk outside. I teach a 1-minute self care practice where you're just focusing on your breathing, maybe some shoulder shrugs, drinking some water just for 1 minute. You don't realize how long a minute is when you're not doing anything else, but just focusing on the time. And science has shown even that 1-minute practice lowers your heart rate, lowers your cortisol levels, lowers your stress levels, as well as you get the dopamine hit of setting a goal and achieving it. So once you start to see all these micro moments, maybe you park at the far parking spot, so you're fitting in some movement. Maybe you're listening to a book. If you said you wanted to read more, things like that, you can listen to a book on your commute or call that friend that you've been meaning to catch up with for a while or listen to a podcast like this one. There's so many micro ways to fit in these different parts of self-care that then you find the time where all of a sudden it becomes, they become habits, they become automated. Like I know I bookend my day with me, and so in the morning I'm fitting in movement and meditation, but some days I may be running late, and so I only have time for maybe a 10-minute yoga practice and a 5-minute meditation. Other days I might have more time, but it's about the consistency of the actions happening on a regular basis where you really get those benefits.
Hmm. I agree. Um, so let's talk about the book,
Mhm.
Balance Breakthrough. What's one core concept from the book that listeners can put into practice immediately that you would like them to know about that might even maybe inspires them to go buy the book as well?
I mean, the book, it's actually kind of like your own personal do-it-yourself playbook. So it's everything that I teach and work with someone one-on-one. I put it all in there because I don't want to gatekeep any of this. I want everybody to have the opportunity to start to take care of themselves. And so it's so super simple. The front half, we kind of break down the problem a little bit and really help you understand why burnout's a problem, why you want to address it, how important is mental fitness and finding work-life balance. And that second half, it's all about how to start reframing your mindset, how to reframe your time, and then what is that self-care and how to add in. So there's a lot of like actionable steps throughout the book, a lot of check sheets, a lot of self-assessment and self-reflection to help you start to make these changes. So you when you pick up the book, you can kind of you don't just sit and plow through it and read it all at once. It's one of those ones you kind of slowly digest because you might start with the mindset and start practicing those exercises and take a week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks to get good at maybe doing that gratitude piece of reflecting on what went well, reflecting on what was positive that day, because you're actually developing new neural pathways when you do that. You're retraining your brain. And it takes a while to build a new neural pathway if you think about it. Again, another analogy, it's like going hiking in the woods. You know the path that you've always gone down, it's well worn and things like that. And so sometimes that might be, I have to hustle to get ahead. I'm never going to be good enough. I have to, do all these things. And we're training our brain to now think a new way. You're creating a new path in the woods. You're creating a new neural pathway. And so you need that time for that repetition in order for it to become easy for your brain to follow. Because especially when we're stressed or when we're in crisis, we don't always think rationally. And so you need it to be well worn enough so that that muscle memory kicks in and you think, okay, I can handle new things. I'm good at challenges, changing some of those I have tos to I get tos, or that growth mindset of adding the word yet, to different sentences creates a whole new way of thinking about any situation. Like I can go from I'm not good at math to I'm not good at math yet. And that's where you begin that small process. So this isn't a one and done kind of thing, but definitely by building these new habits, new systems, new ways of thinking, new ways of acting, you're going to start to then see these changes.
The analogy of the neural pathways, it's interesting because once again, I kind of flash back to actually this morning. My wife and each morning we go out for a walk in the wilderness here in British Columbia in the mountains, and there's all these worn paths, right? And this morning I said, "Hey, let's go down this way." And she's like, "Well, there's no path there." I go, "That's okay. Let's go there anyways. I can see the clearing. We know where it's going to come out, kind of." And
Mhm.
so we did. And, we got a few, thorns on the side of the leg and whatever. And it was a little bit tougher. And we had to hang on to trees as we walked down a fairly steep embankment, but we still came out where we wanted to. We just took a different path. And it's interesting because it challenged us. It gave us a new way to see things. And we still ended up coming out on the other side going, oh, we could take that path again, right? And that's what you're doing really. You're creating neural pathways when you challenge yourself, when you're trying new things, when you're taking a different route to work even.
Yeah.
It's all interesting ways for the brain to see things and to really grow. So that's I love that what you said there because that's what I imagined right away.
Mhm.
Where do you the conversation around burnout and self-care, like every decade, every generation has its buzzwords, especially when it comes to taking care of oneself, or even in business, there's buzzwords. And do the concepts of burnout and self-care change definition um in such a way that they mean something completely different over the next few decades? Like if you think about burnout and self-care in the 1950s,
Yeah.
It probably looked similar, but it meant something different. Do you, in your professional experience, what you've seen over the last 25, like you said, plus years, see burnout and or self-care taking on a different meaning?
Yeah, and I hope to be part of the movement for that. Like you said, you think back in the past, I think burnout, if anything, it was almost more that badge of honor. Like you
Yeah.
were working hard, you were hustling, that whole busy means you're doing good. And so burnout, if anything, was kind of like praised a little bit. I think it was a status symbol, like, wow, look at how hard they worked. Good for
Yeah.
them. Kudos. And self-care, like I said, unfortunately at one point was probably just seen as fluffy, maybe even
Mhm.
people call it a soft skill. And I think if anything, it is a true power move to be able to kind of step in and own that self-care and maybe, like I said, come up with a new name for it or something to be rebranded to see it as the power move that it truly is. Where now burnout we know is bad. So I think that's already kind of shifted. But now to see self-care as essential, like I said, just like eating, sleeping, and brushing your teeth, this is something you're doing on a day-to-day basis. And your people recognize, like if you said, oh my gosh, I've got a toothache, I need to go to the dentist to take care of it, people are like, oh my gosh, absolutely, hope you're okay. If you said, I'm going to take a couple hours today because I just need to kind of reset, granted, as long as you're not letting down any major things, to be able to recognize, like, all right, good, I'm glad you're taking care of yourself mentally and emotionally so that you can show up in a good place. Because a lot of times, I don't know if you've ever heard the expression, you can't pour from an empty cup. People a lot of times assume you have to fill up the cup with a pitcher and pour into
Mm.
it like all at once, but drips can fill it up just as effectively as a big pour. And so recognizing these moments of self-care throughout our day, whatever it looks like for you, it is essential and supported and necessary.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, like you said, self care, if I remember, I don't even know if the term self care was used back in the
Oh,
1970s
I
when I
know.
was a kid,
Yeah.
but something to that effect. But it was seen as kind of like even the practice of yoga in the 70s and 80s compared to what people see it as now. Like you have professional athletes who started doing yoga in the late 90s, early 2000s, whereas in the 70s, they're like, what's this kumbaya BS, right?
Right. You think of like the
It
Calgon Take Me Away commercials. It was seen as so fluffy to take a break and take time for yourself. Literally, she was in the bubbles.
Yeah, and like you said, burnout was a badge of honor then, and now it's kind of seen it has a negative connotation, obviously. So changes in the way we think and our perspectives. I want to end on with some lightning round questions. This has been a great conversation. Let's start here. Morning routine or evening ritual? You said you'd like to bookend your day. Morning routine or evening ritual? Which one matters most for you?
Oh gosh. I
Tough
honestly
question.
they both do
I
because my
know.
nighttime sets me up for my morning. So if I don't get a good night's sleep, my morning's gonna stink.
Okay. Next one. One piece of advice you'd give your younger self about balance.
Grace. Give myself grace.
Yeah.
I think I bought into some of those myths from the 50s, probably ingrained in me by my dad and his work ethic and things like that, and to just give myself some grace that I didn't have to be perfect.
What I found today, Daniela, was that just at layman's terms, it's like we're not here to make it woo or kumbaya, but we're also not trying to make it complex either. We're trying to show you the importance of self-care in the form that people can take for themselves. But we also want you to understand that burnout is no longer the 1960s badge of honor, that this is not what gets you through the day or makes your company stronger or your family stronger or whatever group you're leading. It's something that you need to take seriously and try to at least not let happen to you. So I want to thank you for sharing your wisdom, practical tools with us today. For those who want more, please check out Daniela's podcast, Best D Life. That's capital D. Grab a copy of her book, Balance Breakthrough. I'm assuming that would be on Amazon and other places to find books.
Yep, my website will give you links to my podcast, the book, bunch of free resources and everything.
Excellent. And then also follow her work to keep building a life that feels balanced and sustainable. So, as always, links will be in the show notes. Thanks for being here and for helping us all rethink how to find the bliss in our busy. Thank you, Daniela.
Thank you, Quinn.